This is the Collecting Real Estate Podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Pearse, here with your co-host, Bill Hamel.
I'm somewhat more comfortable collecting real estate than I am collecting other stuff.
This is the Collecting Real Estate Podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Pearse, here with your co-host, Bill Hamel. Today's episode is going to be a little different. We're discussing a 15-unit syndication that we closed on last week. Bill, what do you want to start with here?
Well, we hit one of our outcomes. One of our main goals when we reset each year is buying real estate. And that's why we're doing this today, because we just closed on a transaction we've been working on since late 2021.
Yeah, we go back and forth on possible podcast topics or guests, and this was an obvious choice based on the entire process from start to finish. It was my first syndication deal. I believe it was your first syndication as the lead general partner, and there was definitely a lot of learning exercises throughout the entire process.
Without a doubt, we've been studying this stuff. Well, I've been studying this stuff for 2 years now, since I pivoted away from the simple joint ventures on small, medium, somewhat larger size properties. And being part of a syndication in Florida was a great learning experience. Being an LP on a few other syndications was certainly valuable as well. But this one, as a lead sponsor for the two of us, seemed like it was fantastic opportunity to get this first one under our belts as the leads.
Yeah, and it was exciting closing last week. That's always the fun part when you get to that closing table. So we're still riding that high, and there's so many different things we can talk about right now in regards to the property, whether it's the financials or our plan or what we did from the start of the process. But I think the elephant in the room here is this easement that is given prescribed for the ingress egress that we currently have at the property.
That's yeah, that was the area of concern. So we get into this great deal. It seemed like such a no-brainer on paper. We all know anything on paper is certainly not real life, but I can certainly see that we will reposition this one rather easily based on the size and the growth potential here. But yeah, that easement became an issue. And when you trust your real estate attorney for 20 years, who's very conservative, he certainly gives you, the real life attorney perspective on his thoughts on something like this.
I want to try and paint a picture here for the listeners of what we're talking about, and that can be difficult over radio, especially with a drier topic like real estate surveys. But what we're discussing is the driveway for the building goes into a subdivision, and it's really on the border between a city and a town, and it's a nice subdivision that is a quiet street, and that's one of the great features of this building is that it has a exit and entrance on this driveway that goes into a subdivision. Now, we were pretty far along the process before you learned anything about this easement problem, right, Bill?
Yeah, I've never dealt with something like this. It's just part of the due diligence. You get to the survey process. At this point in time, we've already been through a inspection and the legal and financial due diligence, and you order that survey. It comes in, and that one day, Paul Knapp, he doesn't always come. He never comes to our office, but our attorney comes to our office, grabs a survey, and just for kicks, he brings us into the process and says, "Hey guys, let's go through this survey." And we just thought it was a fun exercise with our attorney. And he stumbled into that ingress egress issue, ultimately dug into the title. It certainly put the transaction on pause, but here we are. We're sitting with a ingress egress, and it was just offset from that legal easement, which there lies the challenge.
Yeah, thinking back to that meeting with Paul, going into the meeting, I'm thinking this will be a fun exercise, something I've never done before. Let's look at the survey. I hope I can learn something. And then I'm walking out of that with my head down, going, "Oh no, I hope this deal doesn't fall apart." So we have a driveway that I explained. The driveway, what would you say? It's 6, 10 feet wide.
More than that. It's probably 15
Fif-
feet wide, and then that legal easement is just offset a bit. And I always think that we're just going to be able to overcome the challenge. Simple title issue. It's always handled. I've never had an issue like this keep us from a closing table or create any major hiccup. And yeah, there we are. That is why we were 2 or 3 months late on this closing.
I'm just trying to paint the picture. So we have this driveway, and there is an easement, but the easement covers like half the driveway. So half the driveway isn't covered. There's an easement, there's a driveway, and they don't line up. And because of that, we had problems with title insuring the property.
Yes, and ultimately, fast forwarding, away from a lot of the back and forth with the buyer and seller, who's solving this problem? Our original thoughts are, well, seller, it's your problem. You want to sell, we want to buy, solve your problem. We get to the closing table. Ultimately, we get to a point where it is what it is. And we're weighing out options here. And ultimately, we became very, very comfortable that this easement, which has been used as ingress and egress for the last 60 years, the last 16 or 17 years for our seller, and completely unchallenged. The tax map showed that this easement was or actually the neighboring piece of land to the easement, the property had been paying those taxes, and it had every characteristic of legal prescription where nobody is ever going to be able to successfully challenge not allowing ingress and egress to this property.
Yeah, if you take it to a judge and you explain that the driveway's been used since I think it's 1954. Is that the date?
I think the property was built 55, something like that.
And you explain to the judge that this driveway's been used for that long with no one challenging it. You can't think of there being a problem, but it's so frustrating when that type of red tape and that type of holdup is what's causing the delay on the deal. And we were originally planning on closing this deal, I think late January.
Yeah, late January for sure. I think we had February 1 on the closing date, which was very, very conservative. We were really comfortable with this deal. The bank loved the deal. This was a fast track deal, and this really slowed things down. And the last 2.5 months, we've beat a dead horse here with our options. Ultimately, getting past it.
Yeah, so what we had to do was lay out what our options were. I think the three options that we came up with were finding the heirs to the last individual who owned the lot in question. The second option would be to publish this and simply have a court prescribe a new easement. Or the third would be to pave a new driveway where the easement lines up. And we were stuck looking at those three options and thinking if it was worth moving forward with the deal with those three options in hand.
Yeah, and we were given a great scenario that moving forward, taking care of a small legal detail, but ultimately we have close to 100% possibility to just get that quiet title and everything's all good. Nothing to worry about at any point in the future. But option two, having to physically move our driveway onto the easement, and that would ultimately solve the problem anyway, 100%. Property's a great deal, and that type of work, option one or two, certainly fits in with our underwriting. So it checks those boxes.
So at this point, we've closed on the property after being told that we have a almost 100% chance in court of prescribing a new easement. We are excited to start the turnover process. We think we got a great deal on the building, and we really are excited to begin the process that we planned out months ago, and we know we'll have a successful turnover. Do you want to take this back to when we first found out about the deal and go from there?
Yeah, absolutely. Our trusted broker appraiser, who we love so much because he's brought us a lot of opportunities. And these opportunities, not always, but I would say I always give it a 50-50 shot. When he brings us a deal, I look at it closely. This one, I was super familiar with the location from um, years of familiarity with this area of Troy. And I knew the property because it's directly across from the college I went to. And once I looked at that rent roll based on the unit count, it got my attention. Ultimately, taking a site visit of that property, seeing the way it was situated, the quality of building, the layouts of those two-bedroom apartments with hardwood floors and newer kitchens with granite countertops. And that's when I got excited. This rent roll is way under market. There lies the opportunity.
I'm trying to remember the order of events. Did you tell me about it before you went to see it, or did Neil call you and you went to see it before you even mentioned it?
Neil was on our podcast that morning, and he threw it at me, and I don't necessarily, well, most of the time I probably wouldn't share that with you at that point, because I don't know if it's worth anything or not.
Hmm.
So I play it out a little bit, take that next step. And once I may have told you that I was heading over there because I liked the look of the rent roll and I already knew the property just by being familiar with that location. And I'm sure that I brought it to you with a much more serious outlook after that first site visit.
Well, I remember when you first did bring it to me. I was in my office, I was working, and you kind of just mentioned it. You said, "Hey, that building looks good. What are your thoughts on what we could do with it? What you could do? What would your role be if we were to move forward with this?" And I remember my first thought being, I don't know what I could do for a 15 unit. I don't think I could raise the money myself. I don't know, Bill. I don't know what I can do. And I remember you kind of going back into your office saying, okay, and then continuing to work for 30, 45 seconds and then being like, no, 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 I can do whatever I need to do. Let's work on this. If you're saying this is a good deal, I trust your opinion.
Yeah, that's right. That was funny. I would have forgotten that. Yeah, it was. This deal was not as large as I want to focus on. It still is in the city of Troy. Yes, it's heading towards town of North Greenbush, which is very attractive to me. But just on the value of the deal and thinking about it for a short period of time, saying it's not exactly what I'm looking for size wise, but I can't not do this deal. So I think we originally are like, all right, geez, this is 15 unit. You could just do this yourself. I'm like, sure, I can. And me and you were at a certain point in our relationship, and that was in my mind. All this happened so fast, and then I kind of throw it at you. You discount the whole thing, assuming that I'm just going to do the deal myself or whatever the case may be at that point. And I think I threw you a line, and it took you a minute to tug on that line a little bit to initiate that discussion.
It only took me like 45, 60 seconds, and I was back in your office saying, no, 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 no. Let's see what we can do here. And
That's like
that's
fishing in a stocked pond, right? You
yep.
throw it out there for less than a minute.
Well, because I'm always thinking about, okay, what's my next move? What do I want to do next? How am I going to do it? And this wasn't on my radar. So for it to be thrown out there as a big, big operation and a big move in the next couple of months, it caught me by surprise. But it only took a couple seconds, 1 minute of thinking about it for it to make sense. And that started the raise process. And then that was my first time raising capital for a syndication.
Yeah, and here we go. Ultimately, it happened quickly, but naturally, both of us have to process everything here, and it was such a good deal with serious growth potential. It One thought led to the next. I don't know if it was over within an hour period of time, or if I actually had a day to think about it, and it turned into one day to the next morning, and then we got to that point where it is, man, we could do something here. It doesn't exactly fit my criteria, but there's a lot of potential, and there's room for both of us to benefit in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, I mean, you're looking more for the 20 to 100 unit building that's outside of the cities. This is a 15 unit in the city, so it doesn't match your criteria. And a lot of investors will say no before they even look at the property just because it doesn't match their criteria and possibly miss out on a great deal. When we first talked about it, you said, "What could you do for this?" And I think my first answer was raise the capital. And I wasn't able to raise all the capital. I was challenged by that task. If you do listen to this podcast, a couple episodes ago, I'm saying, yeah, the phone book mentality. I'll take out a phone book, do whatever it takes. And that's easy to say on a podcast. But when it comes down to it, it's hard to raise capital from investors for a syndication or any deal like that, especially when it's your first one. So I learned a lot from that process. I was able to raise part of it, but you had to, I think, raise what ended up being majority of it. And even though I wasn't able to fill the raise, it got the ball rolling for me in that investor relations, capital raising side of things. It's hard to rip the band-aid off and start asking people for large sums of money. But once you do, it's a lot easier to go back and say, "Hey, that deal I asked you about, we closed. Here are the numbers," and you keep them in the loop. And down the road, they're gonna have more trust in you. They're gonna see the success that you've had, and it just gets easier and easier once you rip that Band-Aid off and you start that process of raising capital.
There was that opportunity, and the beauty of working together fruitfully, so to speak, is being able to complement each other. So, okay, we have this great deal. How can we work something out? You've been doing this 1 year. You grabbed your two family, you grabbed your eight family, you reached your goal count for 2021. Here we have a 15 unit with some meat on the bone. Boy, is that a nice stepping stone to get into in 2022, especially when I'm looking at this thing as a 15 unit and it is ripe for the taking on the reposition. So it just seemed like such a great opportunity. And as some people know or will explain in a syndication, there's buckets. Who's going to add what to any deal to provide value, to measure the partnership or negotiate the partnership shares. And ultimately, it was Stephen, can you raise on this deal? And I love how you just explained that, because we all have to do new things starting the first time, and there's the learning experience for all of us. I walked into my first syndication in 2021 saying, yeah, I can raise $1 million, no problem, but I had never been tested. And fortunately, I didn't have to raise $1 million on my first syndication in Florida, but I was able to raise the required amount for what I needed to do to fill my bucket. But it was very, very interesting. It's a humbling experience in a lot of ways, because when you contact 50 people and you don't get 50 yeses, in my case, I got 7 or 8 interested parties out of 50. So you can kind of equate that to baseball hitting. It was pretty good average. It got me the desired outcome, but geez, there was over 40 people that said no.
Yeah, and you have to be willing to accept no's. I got a lot of, "Let me know about the next one. I'm interested, but not this one," and I think a lot of that had to do with me being newer into the industry, being a younger age, and that goes back to what I was saying about I do think once you get that ball rolling, it gets easier and easier once you have that proof of concept and people know that you're a successful real estate syndicator. So I did get a lot of value out of the capital raise, but then there's the asset management side of things, and that's another bucket. And it's something that I am willing and happy to be a part of. And most importantly for me is learn during the process. We've walked the property, I think, twice in the past week, and I'm already learning so much just by going through this process with you. I've watched you turn over buildings this past year, buildings that you've acquired as a partner with other partners, and watching it from a distance. I definitely learned from that, but it's not the same as being a part of that process, walking the building with you, touching that bathroom tile and saying, okay, what do you think about this one? So I think as we go here, from my perspective, I'm just going to be learning every single week as new things come up, and the challenge of being an asset manager shows its head, and you see what you have to do to overcome challenges.
Once again, this deal is perfect for that. So we're able to look at it, feel it, and that's where I excel because I've been an operations guy for a long time, repositioning properties, big, medium, and small for a long time. So we're able to walk through a lot of the details on this reposition as we stare at that rent roll and talk about the different options we have to get the potential out of this building. And yeah, that's the fun. So here we are looking at this building and staring at that rent roll, and we're going to be learning on a weekly basis in a real life scenario, watching this thing reposition one apartment at a time.
Yeah, it's time to get to work, and having investor capital behind you is definitely a good fuel to do whatever you can to get the best outcome for your investors. Is there
No
anything else you want to
doubt.
add on
And
this building?
yeah, the only thing I want to add on this situation was on this raise. I know I learned a lot after my first raise, and fortunately, I was able to backfill a little bit in on this raise, and I had a couple people that invested on my first deal backfill into this deal, and it is so much easier on the second one than it was on the first one for me. Ultimately, I have a hell of a lot more confidence, and my pitch has been much more seasoned. Fortunately, we we are deal selection experts, so it's not hard to pitch a great deal, specifically when you've been doing this for a good period of time. But staying in touch with our investors, sharing what we're doing from deal to deal, showing them our success as we reposition this. So we're able to build that momentum into that next raise.
Yeah, and I plan on being a career syndicator. So this is the rookie year. We're just getting started, and I think this is a great start. It's a great project, great deal, and the raising will just get easier and easier. And I'm excited for that point in time.
Yeah, ultimately, 25% annual returns conservatively for our passive investors, and that's why they're interested.
Oh, it's such a good deal. I'm fine with getting into the numbers. The average rent on this is like what 905, and we're looking at a generous bump into the 1200s on the average unit, and that is why it's such a good deal.
Fully occupied, tenants are paying, rents are 30% under market value. It's a light turns and not a lot of work other than cleaning up the common area hallways and getting that rent roll where it needs to be. So over the first 6 months, 8 months, I'm very confident that we're going to be in a well above that 50% mark of the repositioning.
Yeah, I'm looking at the underwriting this weekend, and I'm thinking, "Oh, I think we could do better than that." We were conservative on the underwriting, and I think we're gonna do even better than what we projected. So at this point, there's a lot of focus on this project and this reposition. And there's also a lot of focus on the next deal, finding the next building that has potential like this and starting that raise early for when we do find that deal, because we're going to inevitably find it. So, for a shameless plug, if there's anyone out there that wants to be a part of a deal like that, let us know because we're still looking.
No, absolutely. Go to hamelrealestate.com and look at the deals that we did in 2021. And, we do good deals.
Upstate New York Capital District and the Hillsborough County, Pinellas County areas of Florida are both on the table for the next possible deal.
Absolutely.